simply work harder than most people. And I think that development in real estate is a team sport, and you got to get along with people, and I think everybody's smart, and it's important that you got to work and operate like a team. And it's not the kind of thing you can cut corners. You have to do the work, and I think I do the work. And so I worked harder than most people, and I get along with people. And I have a real facility for numbers that I could do in my head or quickly on a piece of paper. I don't have to think a lot about it. I think that ultimately serves you well because ultimately the numbers are the basis of how you make decisions. When I started at Tishman, I ran development for Tishman, and that was a typical development company. And we developed hotels. I developed a hotel in Times Square. After about 8 years of doing that, I was asked to run the construction company at Tishman, which I thought was unusual for a real estate person to run a construction company, but I did it. And then I went to Aecom, and I was the CEO of a global construction group that was centered around Tishman. I tried to create a global platform unsuccessfully because overseas, as you know from India, that the contractors self-perform the work and they have thousands of employees, and it's just a very different model. And so I went to the board and said we should be in the development investment business. So I think of myself less as an investor and more as a developer investor, because we're always co-developer or co-general partner with our partners, and we're not just capital allocators. And so I think the pure investor or pure fund investor, I don't think I'm that guy. I think I'm a real estate guy who happens to have a fund, not a fund guy who happens to be in real estate. I'm a real estate person through and through, and I understand how you execute, how you buy, develop, sell, finance, I mean, everything. And so it's very helpful in this, but I don't view myself so much as an investor because my love and soul are really as a developer. We get calls from developers, or we know them, we reach out to them, or we see deals early because we own 2 construction companies. And so I see deals very early in the process. A developer may have an option on a piece of land. He may own a piece of land, or he has a contract to buy a piece of land. He may be very advanced in his drawings. He's hired his architect and engineers. He may be, at a point where he's ready to, even shovel ready in some cases. But typically developers are long on experience and short on cash and balance sheet. They simply don't have the money in hand because they're paying the overhead, and development takes so long that overhead can really hurt you. So when they come to me, they have a deal baked or slightly baked, or at least they bought the ingredients at the store and they're ready to get it baked, or they realize that they've spent years trying to get entitlements and now they don't have the capital to actually do the project or to sign the guarantees for the banks. And so we're really differentiated at Aecom Capital because we have the cash, we have a balance sheet that we can use for guarantees, we have 2 captive construction companies, we have global reach, we have a brand name, we have proprietary deal flow. When they come to me, they say, I need your balance sheet typically, and so that's a real differentiator. And we say, fine, we will co-sign the completion guarantee with you if you meet the net worth and liquidity test with the banks. And if you don't, you can rent our balance sheet. You got to pay us 1% for that. But you have to backstop it with a real company, so that if there's ever a call on the construction guarantee, we both have to fund. And if you don't fund, I don't chase a shell company, I chase somebody with real money. So it's been a real differentiator because I'm willing to come in early, I'm willing to take construction risk, I'm willing to take entitlement risk, and I have a balance sheet. And we're not afraid to use it, and we know how to develop. In many cases, we're as experienced or more experienced than our partners, so we put a person on the team, and we get very involved on a hands-on basis. So it's very different than capital allocators. That nothing wrong with them, they just sit back and they put the money in. They hire asset managers who go out once a month and kick the tires and see and ask a lot of questions. We're involved in the daily, weekly meetings. We're involved in raising debt and equity. We're involved in every step of the process because we're on the guarantees. And once you're on the guarantees, you're the developer. The only difference is that our partners are the day-to-day developers. They do in the minutia, and we're sort of riding sidecar to ask questions and to participate. You have to be very hands-on. I'm in a detail business. This is not transactional. When you raise debt and equity, that is transactional. You buy a piece of land, that is transactional. When you're development, it doesn't sleep. There's just 1,000 issues every day that changes every day, and you have to have a very thick skin about it. You have to deal with a lot of uncertainty because things change, and you get a phone call that somebody says, I'm not doing that, and you go, oh no, what am I going to do now? and the next day you sort of figure it out, or a week later you figure it out. And what I like about the business is it's fluid, it meanders like a river, and it changes on a regular basis. So I teach at Columbia University, and I always tell the students, if you need certainty in your life and you need structure in your life, which is perfectly fine, don't be in the development business, because there's just too many variables. And development is about cutting out the variables. You can't say if. No, just one if. Let's just get it done and keep it simple. And John Tishman taught me, why would you ever build a circular shape when you can do it square? Because square is simply easier, more efficient, less expensive. Keep it simple. And so that's what you try and do. You have to have a lot of patience, and you got to have a lot of tenacity, and you got to stay with it. And if you stay with it, the great wealth has been made in development over time, but it requires tremendous amount of hands-on watching it. And respectfully, it can't always be the junior people because they don't have the experience. So I'm very involved in all these projects, much to my upset sometimes because it takes a lot of time. But you have to. There's no other way around it. It's a hands-on business. What slowed down is the high-end condo market in New York City. And so what you hear about is the billionaires aren't buying anymore. So the guys who were spending $6,000 to $10,000 a square foot for their apartments aren't buying anymore. Well, there aren't many of those folks, and most of the folks spend $2,000 to $3,000 a foot. So that market has dried up. And in New York City, there's no sales over $5 million. I mean, there's very few sales over $5 million. People just aren't spending it. People are waiting and watching. They want to see the market. They want to see what happens in the election. And so that market has dried up, I think, today. I don't deal in that super high-end market because I think it's a very exclusive club, and you got to be very careful because of the risk you're taking. The only high-end project we have is on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. We're going to do 40 high-end condos. But the condo prices there are about half of what New York is. So we're concerned, and it is risky. And the country really doesn't go as New York City goes, but it listens to New York, because New York City is always the leader, always goes first, leads first, whatever. So you look at what happens there. But the rest of the country isn't like New York. New York is a city-state, like London is or Hong Kong is. They're just of the world, not of the U.S. So you can't look at just what happens in New York. There's still, I think, a lot of traction in other gateway cities. You just have to be careful, and you have to ride out the wave. And the way you make money in real estate is by not selling quickly. The way you make money in real estate is by holding. And historically, it's proven that it rises over 9% a year over 30, 40 years over time. The problem is that investment bankers are not compensated that way, and they want to get out quickly, and they want to churn the investment and churn the capital. But if you hold real estate, that's true at any level, with a house, an apartment, a building, if you hold it long enough, you will make money. And that's what real estate was supposed to be, a long-term hard asset. But the bankers have turned it into liquid assets and REITs and whatnot, and they want to churn it every 3 to 5 years to reinvest the capital because they make money that way. So it's a different business in that respect. But if in development, if you can hold on, you'll do just fine. You refinance every 5 years and clip coupons and raise the rents, and you should be in good shape. It's got to be careful. The question is, do you build 500 at once? Do you build 400 at once? Do you build 300? Who knows? I don't. We do what the. It's all about the density of the site and the market and the supply and demands and the cycle. But you don't know. You look for good locations with good sponsorship, with good economics, that hopefully one day will be great. And you just don't know. And you pick your partners first. Your partners are more important than the real estate, because they have a lousy partner in great real estate, he'll find a way to take advantage of you. I mean, if you have a great partner in bad real estate, he'll find a way to fix it. And it's so important because you're married to these people. And I have about 10, 12 different partners, all very different, some nicer than others, some more experienced than others. So that's a very important thing, is to pick the right partners. I don't really do that because it takes too long. And it's really interesting to me. We have a deal in Los Angeles and on Sunset Boulevard, and the developer spent almost 10 years getting it entitled. Now, it's in West Hollywood, which is a very difficult place to get anything approved. And he spent 10 years and some millions of dollars getting this thing approved. And then at the end, he said, oh my God, now I've got it approved, I'm ready to go, but I don't have a balance sheet. I had the good fortune of coming in 2 years ago and saying, I'll buy half the land from you, and we'll finish out the drawings and finish out the plans and whatnot, and then we can start construction. So I'm not against taking the risk, but I don't have the time with a very small company that I have to take 3, 4, 5, 10 years of entitlement risk. Let somebody else do that. I have a project in Flushing, Queens. It's the same thing. They spent 10 years getting it entitled and approved and ready to go. And I came in at the end and helped them get it financed and became a partner. So we're not opposed to it, but you know, entitlement risk is a huge thing because it's a total unknown. No matter what anybody tells you, it will take much longer. There's no way to guarantee the timing. So they'll say, oh, it's only a year. It's always 2.5 years. Say it's 2 years, it could be 3, 4 years. You just don't know. And time kills all deals because you own the land, you've contracted a buyer, you're under option, and you're carrying it. And so you budget for that, but they never budget properly because it just takes too long. And then you're subject to geopolitical risk because the politicians or the community or the mayor, whoever, for whatever reason, decide he doesn't like the deal, doesn't want to build there. You never, you know, all these unknowns. So it's about cutting out variables and having control of the variables. And so with that, that's a huge unknown. So I like to, you know, if I can, you know, the best deal I ever have is when it's fully entitled, it's fully drawn, the financing's ready to go. They just need us to provide a guarantee or put up some cash, which is hard to find. But so we're not afraid of entitlements. I just won't take more than the 12 to 24 month kind. There's a lot of people that say today that the development cycle is at the end. I think they're thinking about New York City. I don't think it is in other cities, but there's a herd mentality, and if lenders get scared, then limited partners get scared, and then sponsors get scared. They get scared last. And so right now the debt market has dropped off the cliff, and everybody's afraid. And there's no real money center banks that are lending money. It's all these hybrid lenders, they're very complicated deals. And so when I was a young person, the cycles were 10 to 15 years, and you could almost track it, and you can when you look back. And when I was sort of middle-aged, it was 5 to 7 years. Well, now it's 1 to 3 years, and I believe that's because of the internet and the transparency in the marketplace, that everybody knows everything. You're in India and Mumbai, you know what's going on in New York. I was in Kuala Lumpur, probably trying to raise money. The guy didn't speak a word of English, but he knew every site I had, every location, and he knew the location behind my locations. He studied New York better than I knew New York. And so it tells me that with the internet and with Google Map and everything else you have out there, the world's very transparent, so there's no big secrets anymore. If I think that Chicago, the South Side's a great location, so do 1,000 other people. No big secret that I haven't, but maybe I got there early. So I was very fortunate when we came out with Aecom Capital. We started it in 2013, and developers were just coming out of their shells saying, okay, let's develop, and I was willing to write some big checks. And now people are afraid because they think the cycle is at the end. No one's a genius about this. No one really knows. This is just bankers saying they're scared and worried. All you can say is, okay, the New York apartments aren't selling. So how do we do it? We just, we're careful. In any development deal, you know what the supply and demand of the market is. You know what the cost of construction is. You know what what things will rent for. So the only real variable in any development deal is the land. If you overpay for land coming in, you're not going to be successful. You can't fall in love with the real estate. You can't overpay for the land. If you pay a fair price for land, then you're okay, because then over time land value appreciates. You can create imputed equity in your transaction and develop it. So we're just we're just careful. I think some of these big funds, I never wanted to be a multi-billion-dollar fund. I mean, it'd be lovely to be that big and make all that money, but when you're a big fund, you're subject to having lots of very young and experienced people that are finding and negotiating deals for you, and that's where mistakes are made. So I wanted to be a fund that I could really help manage, and I have another partner at my age, a very experienced guy, so we can help manage the process. There's too much risk involved. It's a very risky business to be in. Some people don't want to be in development. That's what I've chosen because it's ultimately it's the most fascinating part of real estate, because you create something, you manufacture something, you envision something, you turn a street around or a neighborhood around, and you can watch it grow. And that's for me, that's very exciting. And it involves legal, financial, political, and physical, sort of 4 concentric circles sort of moving up a hill at once. And it changes every day. And so that's, for my personality, I happen to like that because it's exciting. The truth is that I think PPP projects are incredibly difficult to bid. They're incredibly expensive to bid. They're incredibly difficult to win. And then when you win, you don't even know if you've won because somebody says, I don't want to do it. So we bid on a courthouse in Indianapolis a couple years ago. Thankfully, we came in second. We want to come in first, obviously, but we came in second. And we spent $1 million in the bid because you have to draw to design development drawings so that you have enough technical information to put the right cost on the bid on it. And so it's a lot of work in advance of knowing that you've won. And our price was wrong, so we lost. The people who won, for all the right reasons, had a better design and better numbers. And then a week later after they won, the city council had a vote, and they voted against the project. And so you would say, well, geez, why didn't the city council vote before this happened? Well, they didn't. They just didn't. So they voted against the project, and they called the guys up and said, sorry, we're not going forward. And they said, well, we spent $1 million, $2 million. Well, I'm sorry that this is what happens. That's the risk you took. And so the project died, right then and there. So I'm not a big fan of P3s. I think I'm a big fan in mature markets like Canada or Europe, but in the US, it's very nascent. Every state, city does it differently. They don't understand the business. If you and I started a P3 business tomorrow, we'd be out of business in a year because I couldn't afford the overhead. These things take forever and are very resource driven. We still do it because we're a significantly huge infrastructure company, and one day the business will be more mature and it will make more sense, and there'll be legislation that dictates how you do all these things, and it'll be more predictable. But right now it's not very predictable. But we're still doing it. We bid these things. They're all very expensive. We are, in most cases, the co-sponsor. We're the builder, the design builder, and we're the designer, design builder, and we're the engineer. So we head it from many different levels. So if we win, it's a huge success. If we don't, we've lost a lot of money. So it's a tough business. When I started Aecom Capital, I said, give me $200 million. I'll go off and commit the money and see what I can do. But I'm not going to allocate it between real estate, P3, and infrastructure. I'm going to do whatever comes first. Because I knew, as a guy in the real estate business, that I could sit here today with you or anybody, shake hands, and we have a deal. And when P3, you get the RFQ, you get the RFP, you get the team together, you put all the information together, you bid. It takes months to bid. They always delay the bids. Oh, I'm sorry, RFP's coming out in 3 months. Oh, it's coming out in 9 months. Oh, it's coming out at the end of next year. And so you're waiting for this to happen. And you can't bid so many at once because it's just too expensive. So it's a very unpredictable, not fluid business. So I'm not as big a fan. When you win, by the way, it's wonderful because I say there's gold at the end of the rainbow. You get a lot of big development fees and big returns, and it's great, but it's a very tough business to be in. I had a stint in government, so I know what it's like to be on the other side of government and picking people and in the RFP process. It's just, you have to have a stomach for it. Now, I personally have won several RFPs and some very, very big projects, thankfully, when I was a little younger. But now I'm a little less patient, and it's hard to win, and it's so competitive, and you just don't know. You just don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen. So why not do a real estate deal where I at least have control? I haven't bid on an RFP or RFQ. I haven't spent $1 million to bid it. I spent one lunch and we have a handshake, and then I go back and write a term sheet. So not surprisingly, I committed all the $200 million to real estate. I did one small infrastructure deal. We did what I call a private-to-private deal, where we were going to build 6 hydroelectric plants in Ohio. Which personally I don't know a whole lot about, but the deal made sense and the structure was right. And we're going to grow that business. So I hired a key infrastructure executive, and we're going to grow a business so that over time, we want to have a real estate fund, which I already have. We want to have a P3 fund. We want to have an infrastructure fund. And we want to have a European fund. And so we're really in the fund business that I will control as the CEO. That's the long-term vision.